When you're trying to really get a handle on things, all these different political philosophies, it can feel overwhelming, right?
Definitely. So much noise.
Especially if you're someone who, values getting to the heart of things quickly. It's hard to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
That's why today we wanted to do a deep dive into something that's been stirring up discussion. Payam Fazli's Patriotic Societism.
Yeah, it's pitched as potentially, groundbreaking, something that might cut through the usual left-right stuff.
Exactly. And you, our listener, actually pointed us towards Fazli's manifesto, the Patriotic Societist Manifesto.
Right, with the question of just how revolutionary, or maybe even ingenious, this framework really is.
So that's our goal today. We're going to unpack the core ideas of Patriotic Societism.
We'll compare it, contrast it with some established ideologies, see what makes it unique, what its potential impact might be.
And we should mention that subtitle, too.
Oh, yeah. Patriotic Societism is the nemesis of Islamo-communism. That certainly sets a tone.
It really does. So, okay, roadmap for today. We'll look at Fazli's critique of traditional socialism and this Islamo-communism idea first.
Then dig into the actual principles of patriotic societism, how patriotism and this concept of societism mix.
Right, and its relationship with capitalism, nationalism, its stance on secularism, individualism.
And finally, why Fazli thinks this is, well, a necessary and maybe revolutionary response for today. Okay,
let's dive in. Fazli's critique of traditional socialism, where does he start?
Well, it's pretty fundamental. Fazli basically argues that the word socialism itself has been kind of hijacked.
Hijacked? By whom?
By Marxists, primarily. He says for the last, 150 years, their interpretation has dominated everything.
So he thinks the common understanding of socialism isn't the original idea.
Pretty much. He argues the Marxist framing really overshadowed other ways of thinking about, improving society. He feels it got twisted into just being about class struggle.
Interesting. So the conventional socialism we think of today
is largely a product of Marxist and communist thought, according to Fazli, always framing it as this conflict between economic classes.
Okay, and he brings in this term societism. How does that differ?
Right. He argues that societism at its heart should just mean the basic human drive to make society better, without necessarily crushing individual liberty.
So originally being a socialist just meant wanting societal progress.
That's his take. He thinks Marxist ideas came in and skewed it, making it all about forced wealth redistribution, taking from innovators to give to others.
And he makes a point about who gets excluded in that view, right?
Yeah, that's a key part. He says Marxist socialism implies only the working class genuinely cares about society's well-being. It deliberately excludes entrepreneurs, successful people.
And he has that warning, something about a zombie.
He does. He says if societism turns into a zombie, it will become conventional socialism. It shows his fear of that original impulse being corrupted by what he sees as a rigid, harmful ideology.
That's quite an image.
It is. And connecting that back, Fazli is basically saying this drive to improve society isn't some Marxist invention. It's ancient.
Like it's just a natural human thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Since the earliest civilizations, he argues, it's never just been about class conflict. And this is crucial. He links patriotism and societism.
How so?
He suggests that if you truly care about your homeland, you naturally care about the well-being of its society.
So loving your country means wanting to improve it.
Right. If you want your nation stronger, more prosperous, more functional, you're both a patriot and a societist, in his view, no matter your job or income.
That really does challenge the traditional Marxist view, which is often suspicious of nationalism.
Absolutely. It frames patriotism not as a barrier, but as a motivator for societal improvement. He's pointing to this basic human drive that's always been there long before Marx.
Okay, so that helps clarify what patriotic societism isn't, according to Fazli. Now let's get to the core of what it is. What are its main principles?
Well, the name says a lot, right? It's about synthesizing patriotism and societism, meaning he wants to integrate what he sees as positive socialist ideas like equity, public welfare, resource redistribution, but combine them with national sovereignty, cultural heritage, a love for one's country.
So social concern plus national identity.
That's the idea. Harnessing that national spirit for shared societal goals.
Okay, so it keeps the working towards a better society part, but anchors it nationally.
Precisely. And a key part of this is rejecting what he calls the Marxist monopoly over socialism.
Right, you mentioned he thinks the idea is older than Marx.
Yeah, he points to ancient places like Sumer and Elam as examples of early societies aiming for collective well-being.
So he's trying to free the concept from specific leftist ideology.
Exactly. Reclaim it as something more universal, more timeless. The focus isn't on Marxist critiques of the West, but on national independence, cultural uniqueness, individual liberty.
Interesting. He'd probably critique how some groups use anti-imperialist language then.
Yeah, he suggests groups like Islamo-communists might use that rhetoric to hide authoritarianism and suppress freedoms, which Patriotic Societism would challenge directly.
Detaching social improvement from just one lens and putting it in a broader historical national context, that feels potentially quite different.
It is.
Now, you mentioned capitalism earlier. How does that fit in? Because traditional socialism is usually pretty anti-capitalist.
This is a really distinguishing feature, and you could argue part of the potential genius of his framework. Patriotic Societism doesn't see capitalism as the enemy by default.
Really? How does that work?
Fazley sees capitalism's potential innovation, wealth creation, economic growth as powerful tools for the nation's benefit.
Tools.
Yeah, tools to be used strategically. The key is the direction. The goal is making sure economic progress serves the whole society, strengthens the nation, preserves its culture. Not just profit for profit's sake, or what he sees as globalist homogenization.
Does he give examples?
He does. He points to figures like Elon Musk and Javier Milei.
Interesting pairing.
Right. He sees Musk's ventures, like SpaceX and Tesla, as private enterprise, pushing boundaries, but also tackling global issues, benefiting the economy and society.
In Milei.
With Milei in Argentina, Fazley sees his quite radical economic reforms as an attempt to restore national economic strength and self-reliance by cutting back government overreach.
So different approaches, but both using market energy for national goals.
That's how Fazley frames it.
Yeah.
Channeling capitalism's energy towards national and societal improvement. It's a kind of patriotic economic reform.
Harnessing capitalism, but with a national focus and societal benefit, that is a significant departure, isn't it? Seems like a potentially revolutionary way to view economics.
It certainly breaks from traditional socialist thought.
Okay, what about national identity? Traditional socialism often leans internationalist, right? Worker solidarity across borders.
Exactly.
All right.
Fazley deliberately tries to sort of rehabilitate national identity.
Yeah.
He defines nationalism positively as a love for country, culture, people, but without hostility or superiority towards others. He strongly contrasts this with xenophobia.
Like a healthy pride versus an aggressive one.
Yes. He points to French secularism, laïcité, as a kind of model. A strong shared identity, but upholding individual freedoms and diversity within it.
Which contrasts with what he calls Islamo-communism.
Right, which he argues prioritizes a collective religious identity over individual or national ones. For Fazley, shared history, culture, values, these are unifying forces for societal good.
And that idea of laïcité leads right into another core principle. Secularism seems absolutely central for him.
Foundational, absolutely. He insists the state must be entirely separate from religious influence.
And it's a specific kind of secularism.
Yes, he calls for a 21st century interpretation of laïcité. The explicit goal is removing religious dogma, and he specifically names Islam from government and society.
That's quite assertive.
It is. It's a direct response to what he sees as a threat of Islamo-communism, which he views as incompatible with Western values, culture, and progress. He argues it inherently suppresses freedom.
And he links this to Iran.
Definitely. He points to the Islamic Republic using Marxist-like rhetoric to, in his view, legitimize theocratic rule and mask inequalities under an anti-imperialist banner.
So patriotic societism positions itself as the secular, egalitarian alternative.
Precisely. Aiming to dismantle what he sees as the dominance of a privileged Muslim ruling class in Iran. And he worries about similar religious dominance potentially emerging in the West due to demographic shifts.
So for Fazley, secularism isn't passive separation. It's an active stance against religious dogma in public life.
That's a really good way to put it. It's proactive, assertive secularism, meant to protect liberty and promote rational discourse.
And this ties into individualism too, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's the next key pillar we should look at. How does it balance the individual and the collective?
Yeah, how does that work?
Well, Fazley paints a sharp contrast. He sees Islamo-communism as this stifling collectivism, crushing innovation, dissent, all for a single ideology.
And patriotic societism.
It champions individual freedoms, sees them as the engine for communal progress. So the idea is, if you empower individuals, foster their unique talents, let them achieve things, that ultimately benefits the entire community. The whole nation gets stronger.
So individual flourishing fuels national strength. A bottom-up approach.
Exactly. It's not individual versus society, but empowered individuals building a vibrant society.
Okay, I see. And that leads into the idea of patriotic societism as a kind of defense mechanism.
That's right. Fazli positions it as the necessary defense against two things: Islamo-communism on one hand and what he calls globalist homogenization on the other.
Protecting national identity and values like liberty and dignity from those forces?
Yes, safeguarding sovereignty and uniqueness against those perceived threats.
But it's not just about defending one nation in isolation, is it? There's a global aspect, too.
Yeah, that's interesting. He talks about global solidarity.
What does that look like?
He encourages alliances with like-minded patriots internationally, people who share a commitment to protecting, as he puts it, Western civilization and its heritage from collectivist and Islamist threats.
So shared struggles, shared values across borders.
Right. He thinks these fights for freedom, justice, cultural identity are globally connected. Collaboration based on shared values and mutual respect for national identity, not some imposed global order.
And he gives an example with his own party.
Yes, he mentions the laic Patriotic Socialist Party of Iran extending solidarity to Western patriots fighting similar battles against Islamo-communist influences. It underlines that idea of mutual respect and action against shared challenges.
Okay, so summing up patriotic societism as Fazli presents it, it's this blend of patriotism, social justice, secular governance.
Yeah, presented as a distinct alternative to Islamo-communism and what he sees as the corrosive side of neo-communist leftism, deeply rooted in Enlightenment values, justice, preserving civilization.
Which brings us neatly to that direct comparison. Patriotic societism versus Islamo-communism.
Right. He acknowledges they might look like they share some goals for societal change, superficially.
But underneath.
A fundamental, irreconcilable ideological gap, he argues.
How so?
He says Islamo-communism often uses religion for social control, to enforce a specific political and moral order.
Whereas patriotic societism is foundationally secular.
Exactly. It explicitly rejects religious dogma in governance and law.
Wow.
He also points out how Islamo-communism historically exploits discontent using religious narratives, conspiracy theories, divisive rhetoric.
And patriotic societism's approach
Is to tackle systemic issues, directly workers' rights, economic equity, but without relying on religious dogma or conspiratorial thinking.
He also mentioned some historical context, didn't he? About Marxist movements in the Middle East.
Yeah, during the Cold War, how they often split along secular versus religious lines. You had secular socialists and then Islamist factions using leftist language.
But not implementing actual socialist policies.
Right. And he holds up the Islamic Republic of Iran as a prime contemporary example of this contradiction.
Using anti-imperialist language while reinforcing an Islamic hierarchy.
That's his argument, a hierarchy that marginalizes many. Patriotic Societism, then, directly challenges this by exposing the inconsistency and pushing for a truly secular, egalitarian alternative. Equal rights regardless of religion.
Now, there's another comparison that's absolutely critical to address. National Socialism, Nazism.
Yes. Crucial distinction.
Because, let's be frank, putting patriotic or national next to socialism can immediately raise huge red flags for people, given history.
Understandably, and Fazli is extremely clear on this. He emphasizes that patriotic societism is fundamentally different from and completely opposed to Nazism.
He outlines specific differences.
Meticulously. 6 key areas where they are polar opposites to avoid any confusion.
Okay, let's go through them. Number 1.
Ethno-supremacy versus universalism. Nazism was based on race, the Aryan ideal. Patriotic societism completely rejects racial determinism or superiority. National pride is inclusive, open to all citizens who contribute, regardless of race or class.
So identity based on shared values and culture, not race.
Exactly. Based on principles and merit, not ethnic origin. It's fundamentally inclusive where Nazism was fundamentally exclusive.
Foundational difference. Okay, number 2.
Anti-individualism versus individualism and merit. Nazism crushed individuality. The person was nothing, the state everything. Blind obedience.
And patriotic societism.
Values individual freedom, agency, thought within a strong nation, yes, but based on merit and talent, not authoritarian submission, fostering leadership without stifling individuals.
Got it. Number 3.
Expansionism versus civilizational defense.
Yeah.
Nazism was all about aggressive military conquest, domination, might makes right.
Whereas patriotic societism is focused inward, or defensively outward.
Defensively outward. It advocates for self-defense of civilization and national sovereignty, not conquering others, protecting identity and independence from threats like globalism or extremism, not dominating other nations.
Okay, clear contrast. Number 4.
Pagan mysticism versus secular rationalism. Nazism leaned heavily on weird occult stuff, Germanic myths, pseudo-religious race theories.
And patriotic societism.
Completely opposed. It's resolutely secular, rational, based on Enlightenment principles.
Yeah.
Rejects all religious dogma or supernatural beliefs in governance. Reason over myth.
Makes sense. Number 5.
Fazley calls it socialism in name only versus a true reclamation of socialism. Despite the socialist name, Nazi economics was state-controlled corporatism favoring big business, suppressing workers.
And patriotic societism aims for
A genuine socialism, he argues, but detached from Marx. Prioritizing national prosperity, well-being for all citizens, rejecting class war and globalist exploitation, benefits shared broadly for national strengths.
Okay, and the 6th final difference.
This one is really striking. Collaboration with Islam versus eradication of Islam.
Wait, Nazism collaborated with Islam?
Yes, they allied with figures like the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, saw Islam as a potential strategic tool.
And patriotic societism
Views Islam as a major civilizational threat and actively seeks to remove its influence from governance, society, law in Iran and the West.
Wow. So one saw a potential ally, the other sees a force to be removed from power entirely.
Exactly. These are truly fundamental, irreconcilable differences. No room for comparison there, according to Fazley.
Absolutely vital to understand those distinctions. Okay, let's shift now. Why did Fazley actually found the Leg Patriotic Socialist Party of Iran? What drove him?
He says it was seeing the suffering in Iran under what he calls the oppressive, outdated Islamic paradigm.
Feeling trapped.
Yes, trapped in a false choice. Either the current theocracy or a traditional opposition still rooted, he thinks, in the same problematic Islamic foundations.
Neither option good enough.
Not for younger generations, he argues. He believes they've largely rejected these ideologies. He even makes the pretty bold claim that Iran isn't really a Muslim-majority nation in spirit anymore.
A revolution against Islam itself?
That's his view. He felt a desperate need for a movement that actually represented the secular aspirations of this new generation.
So it's deeper than just politics.
Yeah.
A fundamental shift away from the religious framework.
Precisely. And he stresses this isn't just about Iran. He sees parallels, shared struggles in the West.
With demographic shifts, cultural dynamics?
Yes. He criticizes mainstream politicians for, in his view, appeasement instead of confrontation. He positions patriotic societism as this necessary third way.
So what are the party's core goals then?
The main one is crystal clear. Remove Islam from all aspects of governance and public life in Iran. He argues its teachings cause immense suffering.
How? Through laïcité.
Yes, a strict 21st century interpretation to completely eradicate what he sees as Islam's antisocial and inhumane influence there.
Or replace it with
A laic republic of Iran. Secular, rule of law, equal rights for everyone regardless of color, gender, religious background, government neutrality.
And he also pushes back against some modern left ideologies.
Oh, yes. Explicitly rejects political correctness of the left and the ultra-extremist, pseudo-religious cult of woke ideology.
Oh.
He feels they've abandoned rationality and freedom for cultural dominance. So the party takes a pragmatic line, willing to ally with any group in the free world committed to confronting Islamism and understanding its dangers.
Which ties back to that global solidarity idea.
Absolutely. He founded the party aiming for alliances with Western patriots who value their civilizations and want to protect them from collectivism, including Islamo-communism.
Seeing the struggle in Iran as linked to global challenges.
Intrinsically linked. He believes liberating Iran from Islamism helps defend the free world's principles. He has that powerful quote.
The one about Western civilization.
Yeah. The fall of Western civilization would mean the end of liberty, progress, and human dignity as we know it. The party is meant as a rallying cry for those who believe in enlightenment, justice, patriotism, standing with patriots worldwide in this critical civilizational struggle he perceives.
Okay, so wrapping up the key takeaways, it really does seem Fazley presents patriotic societism as revolutionary in several ways.
It does seem that way. First, that radical redefinition of socialism, stripping out Marxist dogma, linking it to national identity.
Second, integrating patriotism positively, not as an obstacle to social goals.
Third, that pragmatic, strategic view of capitalism as a tool for national benefit. That's quite ingenious, potentially.
Fourth, the assertive, unwavering commitment to secularism, especially opposing Islam's influence in public life.
Fifth, championing individual freedom within a national framework, not opposed to it.
And finally, its direct challenge to what it identifies as Islamo-communism and woke ideology, positioning itself as a defense of Western civilization.
Yeah, it's a comprehensive framework, Definitely challenges a lot of assumptions on both the left and the right.
No kidding. It's a lot to process.
It really is.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've just scratched the surface here in this deep dive. Each of these elements, redefining socialism, patriotism, capitalism, secularism, individualism, confronting ideologies, they all deserve much more thought and critical reflection.
Absolutely. It leaves you, our listener, with some big questions. Does this patriotic societism framework actually offer a compelling, maybe even ingenious solution to the complex challenges we're facing now in the 21st century?
And maybe we can end on that powerful statement from Fazli again. The fall of Western civilization would mean the end of liberty, progress, and human dignity as we know it. Think about that. Does patriotic societism, as we've discussed it, offer a viable, perhaps revolutionary path to prevent that kind of future? That's something to really mull over.